Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Simone here, and today we're doing another recent reads video. I will link down below my last one where I talked about 3 YA fantasy books that I had read and wanted to talk about. Today I'm going to be talking about 7 books. This is a bit of a mishmash, but it goes from a DNF, we have a 2-star, a 4-star, and then 4 5-stars. So, I mean, it was a great mixture of things that I read at this point. Again, I'm going to be talking about them in the order that I read them. That's generally how I like to do these recent reads videos. So yeah, let's get started. So the first book is actually the DNF that I did, and that is Robin Hood by Henry Gilbert. I will link it up there because I have not got my copy anymore. Well, I do. It's in my unhaul stacks that probably the next video that you see will be my unhaul, which I'm excited about, but I don't have the book to hand. I DNF'd this one because it just wasn't very interesting. I didn't really know, I don't think Henry Gilbert is kind of the authority on Robin Hood. As far as I know, like, Robin Hood is obviously a legend, and it's definitely something that has been written. I think it was written in the 1800s, this particular book, but it definitely wasn't like the original or anything. And I just found the writing to be really dry. It starts off talking about Robin Hood, who we all know, you know, stole from the rich to give to the poor, and it has a lot of, he uses his merry men, who are kind of his, like, band of other people, and the book just wasn't that interesting. Like I said, it was very, overwritten, and which again is something I am not a big fan of. I do not like super flowery language for the sake of super flowery language. It's just not interesting to me at all. And so yeah, I just found this book to be really dry, boring, difficult to read, and I DNF'd it after, how long? 16 pages, so not very long. I didn't give it a massive chance, but yeah, it just wasn't that interesting for me, so I decided not to even bother. So now we have that one out of the way, we can go on to some much more interesting reads. The next one I have to talk about is an interesting read, but it was super sad, and again a very difficult one. So yeah, it definitely comes with its own difficulties in terms of the reading experience. So I read Beyond Evil by Nathan Yates. This book is about the senseless murder of Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, these 2 beautiful girls on here, and they were murdered by Ian Huntley, who was the school caretaker at their school, and both he and his girlfriend Maxine Carr were both arrested. I believe Maxine Carr was arrested for perverting the course of justice, and also for I think she was it perjury? But this basically, Nathan Yates was a Daily Mirror staff reporter, so he was there during the them trying to find Holly and Jessica when they were missing, before their bodies were found. He had interviewed Ian Huntley, I believe, before they were arrested for this, before anyone had any clue that they had anything to do with it, because Ian Huntley was part of the search for Holly and Jessica, and was a big part of that. And then obviously when he was then found to be the person who had murdered them, it went to the Old Bailey where they had the trial, etc., and this book basically details the whole thing. I found this book to be really well written. I do think that Nathan Yates has a very unique perspective in that he was there before they ever knew that this was going to be a murder case. Throughout, you know, it was kind of a big thing, and like I said, he interviewed the couple beforehand. He witnessed the hunt for them, and it very much is him talking about his experiences with them, which I find to be really interesting. I say enjoy is probably not the right word, but I do think that I'm more likely to read and kind of get a lot from a non-fiction true crime book where the author has a direct link to the case, because I often find if it's somebody who's just looking at a case from like a completely separate perspective, it can be done well, but often I find that there's a disconnect because it doesn't really make a lot of sense why they're writing about this particular story. But like I said, this one, Nathan Yates was very much involved in the whole thing from the very beginning, so it makes sense that he would write this book. I think it was done in a really respectful way. It does talk quite a lot about Ian and Maxine, so if you're more into true crime that talks about the victims, although this does talk massively about the victims, you know, this is about the victims but also the perpetrators and the crime and the kind of trial, so it's more that side of true crime, I think. So it very much depends what kind of thing that you are looking for, but I think this one was done really well. I've decided to keep this book on my shelves because I've started to keep books, guys. Leanne did it for me. She has influenced me massively in curating my shelves. Like I said, I've got rid of loads, but I am keeping books on my shelves that I have really enjoyed and think I might potentially dip back into again. So yeah, this is definitely one that I think was done so well that I want to keep hold of it. The third book that I want to talk about in this video is a little bit of a cheat, I guess, for a book, but it was an audiobook essentially that I listened to. Leanne from Literary Diversions, who I just mentioned, actually read Go the Fuck to Sleep by Adam Mansbach to me, which is a children's, it's not a children's book, but it's basically done in the style of a children's book. That's supposed to be, I guess, for the adults who are struggling to get those kids to sleep. And I think it was so funny. Leanne owns it and she basically read it out to me over FaceTime, which was delightful, I have to say. I do think that Leanne needs to do audiobooks because her voice is one of the most interesting and like soothing, and just like, I just absolutely love listening to her. So yeah, I absolutely love that one. I gave it 5 stars. It was just funny. It was so hilarious. Obviously, it's not super serious, is it? But I did think it was funny. And I had listened to the whole thing, so we both decided that we were going to put it on our Goodreads because she read it, so therefore had read it. And I had listened to it, therefore I had read it as well. So that's that. Next up, I read Single by K.L. Slater, and this is one I haven't really heard anyone talking about, but this is a thriller that I gave a 5-star to. I absolutely loved this book. This follows a woman named Darcy, who is a single mother, and she's a single mother to 2 boys, and one day she takes them to the local playground, and one of them has an asthma attack and is rescued, seemingly, by George, who is a doctor who is passing with his young daughter, and he's a single parent also. And George and Darcy kind of hit it off and they end up moving in together, and then Darcy gets a bunch of flowers with a bit of a weird message on it, and George tells her it's from his obsessed ex-girlfriend who he is trying to figure out. And then one day this woman turns up at the house, and there are things that she's saying that could potentially put things at risk. Darcy also has her own secrets, and it's very much about that. I do think that the back of this book gives away quite a lot, but yeah, it is such an interesting book. There are so many twists and turns. You don't know who to trust at all throughout the whole thing. It's just one of those like psychological thrillers that just I found to be really interesting. It's not like a super well written book, but I do think it was just one of those books that just really kind of resonated with me, and I found myself wanting to keep reading it. I read this quite quickly. This was actually a book that I was sent by NetGalley and by the publisher, so massive thank you to them for sending it to me. And I couldn't have been more excited to read this one. It was just so well done. And I do think it's one of those books where like you were reading it, but you kind of had that feeling in the pit of your stomach that something was not quite right, and then you kind of couldn't figure out who wasn't quite right, but somebody wasn't. And yeah, I couldn't imagine the way that it all ended was just yeah, it was a mind trip, but I absolutely loved it and I would highly recommend. So if you like thrillers and you like kind of psychological thriller, then this is definitely a good one for you. Okay. Next up is a book that I read because I was actually sent this by Alex from Ernest Alex Reads. So a massive thank you to Alex, because this may be my favourite book of the year, and I read it without even like high expectations. I kind of was like, oh, like it'll probably be alright, but I'm not sure how I'm gonna feel about it. I adored this book. Honestly, I literally rang Leanne like, oh my god, I can't believe this book, you need to read it, it's so good. And yeah, I don't even know what to say really, other than Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. I feel like this book got so much hype last year, and I think I'd kind of gone like, it can't be that good surely, like everybody seemed to love this book, like it was on everyone's favourites of last year. I felt like everyone who read this thought it was like the best book ever, and I just didn't really understand the hype. Like I was like, oh, it'll be fine, I'm sure. I loved this book. I totally understand why everybody loved this. This is such a wholesome read, and I would urge you all to read this. This follows Alex Claremont Diaz, who is the son of the President of the United States. His mother is in office, and he is working in politics as well alongside her, and he is just a dream. And then it also, well, the big thing for them in this book is that he has kind of an awkward, I guess, like negative energy, shall we say, with the Prince of Wales from obviously the UK, and his name is Henry. And Henry and Alex are essentially told that they have to make a kind of marketing decision, and they have to patch things up basically by having like a super Instagram friendly relationship. They have to have a good friendship that they can take Instagram pictures of, and you know, see each other like 3-4 times a year, whatever, and like pretend to be best friends. Except they fall in love. And this book though, I was reading this, like this is probably, I think this is what, 400 pages, this book? Oh yeah, just over 400. And I read this in sort of like 100-page chunks because I just could not put it down. I would read a bit and just keep going. This is super, super sexy. This is like romance at its finest. This was so, so good. I've also just seen the front cover, or the cover reveal for Casey McQuiston's next book, which I believe is Sapphic, and I cannot wait to read that one because this one was fantastic. The relationships in this were just so cute, and it wasn't even like it was just Henry and Alex's relationship. It was also all of the side characters basically. This one also has some very, very sexy scenes in, and I was there for it. This just, honestly, I could just hold this book up as like perfection, because I cannot think of a single thing that was wrong with this book. I think even if you don't like romance, because romance is generally not my bag really, I loved this and would read this again and again. Again, I'm keeping hold of this one. I also think it's beautiful, and yeah, I need more like this, please. So recommendations, if you have any, for other books like this. Then the penultimate book that I want to talk about in this video is another fantastic one. This was another 5-star read that I absolutely loved, and I'm really glad that I did read it. This is Slay by Brittany, I was going to say Kira Johnson then, but that's the main character. This is Slay by Brittany Morris, and this follows a 17-year-old girl named Kira Johnson, who is one of the only black girls at her school, and she has basically created a secret online VR game named Slay, and she loves it, but nobody in her real life knows that it's her. It's basically a online VR game for other black gamers who can see themselves in this game, because there are other games that are being played around where the only black characters are either mutant dwarfs and things like that, or they are just not very nice characters. Anyway, one day somebody is murdered, a teenager is murdered over a dispute in the Slay world, and basically things start to crash around her ears. Like I said, nobody knows that it's her, but the media is now labelling it as this kind of racist hub for thugs and exclusionism, and it kind of is about that. She then has kind of she's trying to figure out how to keep the safe space that she's created, how to go about that. It's so good. It has a lot of gaming references. I actually really want AJ to read this book because I think that he'll really enjoy it. I think the characters in this were fantastic. Kira as a character was so amazing. I think it was great to see the relationship between her and her best friends, and her and her sister. Their relationship was really lovely. And yeah, I just think this was really well done. It's definitely a book that's very of time. Like, I think it's very kind of it has like that gaming vibe, which definitely feels like something that's very like current. And yeah, I just think this is such an important book, and I feel like if you haven't read this, you definitely have to. I think it's such a cool thing as well to think about, like friends that you meet online being your actual, like, they are your true friends as well. Like, it's not real life friends are not your only friends, if that makes sense. Like, it isn't. That was lovely. I should also say Victoria, from what Victoria read, sent me this book in her, I won this in her giveaway, so a massive thank you to Victoria, because this one was fantastic. And as I said, this was another 5-star read, and I read this one straight after Red, White and Royal Blue, so that was just like a fantastic yeah, that was a nice little duology that I read of awesome books there. And then the final book that I have to talk about today, unfortunately, is kind of leaving it on a bit of a downer, because I gave this one a 2-star, and this is Anything You Do Say by Gillian McAllister. I'm not sure how you say her first name, but I wanted to love this book, and I do still really want to read Gillian McAllister's other books. I do own another one of her books, and I definitely am interested to read it. And I don't think that her writing is bad in any way. I do think that that's really interesting. I just found this book to be super problematic. I buddy read this one with Leanne, and we talked a lot about this one. This basically follows, it's a really interesting synopsis as well. So this basically follows a girl, I can't remember her name now, Joanne, I think her name is, who is in a nightclub with her best friend, and she gets kind of sexually harassed, I guess, by a man in this nightclub, and they decide to leave, and she's walking home, and then she hears footsteps behind her, and so she thinks it's the man from the pub, and she essentially pushes him, and he falls down some steps, and then it splits into two timelines, I guess. So you have one chapter is what would happen if she stayed with him and reported what had happened, and then one is if she decided to basically walk away and pretend that it never happened, and the kind of sides of that. I liked the like I said, the synopsis of this and the kind of like premise was really interesting. I think it could have been done in a really interesting way. I think that there was a lot of weird like problematic content in this. There was a massive like emphasis on children being the be-all and end-all of life, and the only way that you could have a meaningful like existence was to have kids, and she talked about that a lot in this book, and it felt very like stifling. Like, it's something that definitely gets me in a kind of like, it's just not a very nice thing to kind of think about all the time, about like the only way that your life is valid is if you have children, and I think that that is a really damaging viewpoint. So I found that to be really difficult. I did enjoy this otherwise, but I do think that she was not a very likeable main character. I will say that. I think that Joanne as a character is just incredibly irritating, and you do just want to shake her and tell her to stop being so silly. It definitely has miscommunication as well in this as one of like the big tropes, and that is not something I enjoy. So yeah, this wasn't my favourite book or thriller in any way, but as I said, I do hold out more hope for reading more Gillian McAllister books, but yeah, this one for me was unfortunately a bit of a miss. But there you are, guys. That is the 7 books that I have recently read. Like I said, we're still catching up with the books that I'd read before I started this little series, so hopefully I will do a few more of them in the next one. But let me know what you have recently been reading. I'm really interested to know, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, guys.